Thanks very much for having me. I'm joining you from Meanjin or Brisbane, and so I'm on the land of the Yagara and the Turrbal, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and anyone from First Nations on the call. As I said, I love meeting with the dragons because I've learned so much about how you support each other as a community. And I think it's a particularly interesting community with real vibrancy in it. So tonight I've got a presentation with slides to go through, but actually I'm really happy for you to interrupt and ask questions and I love hearing your thoughts and opinions as well. So I was asked to speak on the importance of collective advocacy, and well done, Dragonclaw, because I got plenty of notice about this and actually could think about what I wanted to say in this space for quite a while, which, as you know, in patient advocacy doesn't really happen very often, and I really appreciated it. So I hope I stuck with the remit, but you can ask me questions to pull me back to where you want to talk anyway. Now I'm on a new screen, so I'm a bit slower clicking it. I just want to declare my interest. I think it's really important as patient advocates that we're just upfront about where we come from. So Patient Voice Initiative gets money from multiple pharmaceutical companies, and that helps us pay for quite a lot of things, including 17 and a half hours of my time each week, which is great. That's not obviously, that it never covers your full time, but how lucky am I to get that? And if you want to see which companies sponsor me, because it changes, I just have the link there for it. I also have interests in this group called Health Technology Assessment International. I'm super thrilled that this area, which has often been quite neglectful of patients traditionally, I'm super thrilled to be the first person from a patient community to be their vice president. And in June, I become their president. And boy, do I have lots of things that I want to raise for patient communities there. And I get some money. I don't get any money actually for my book, but I did once get a royalty. But this time round, we're doing this book open access, so there won't be any money there. I do get some money from Boehringer Ingelheim for their biannual meeting. And I also get a small lecturing fee from a university in Rome. Unfortunately, it is a Zoom call. But I live in hope, and you can see my other interests there. And I just want to say that although I was the patient community representative on the Health Technology Assessment Policy and Methods Review Reference Committee, I'm definitely not speaking on behalf of them. These are my views. So my day job as such is with Patient Voice Initiative, and we're a bit of a different patient organisation for those who haven't bumped into us. We're led by our president, Jessica Bean, and Jessica Bean is a patient advocate who lives with cystic fibrosis. And some time ago, new treatments were coming through for the cystic fibrosis community, and Jessica had the benefit of being able to get onto trials, and she'd found these treatments life-changing. But she realized that actually the rest of her community was not going to benefit from them unless they were reimbursed on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. And I bumped into her in 2016 as she was doing a bit of a multi-stakeholder roadshow going around Australia, asking people what did they believe about the way we made these decisions and the roles of patients and how much involvement patients could have. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. This is my absolute passion, having spent some time working in health technology assessment. That's the process that sits behind how these decisions are made. And I can see that, the patient knowledge was absolutely critical to making good decisions. And now I just do it in a voluntary capacity for different countries around the world and help them with it. And I'd love to do anything I can to support you. So by 2018, we had formed the Patient Voice Initiative. And our mission is that patients are seen, heard, and valued in healthcare decision making, especially that process that sits behind what we reimburse in our system. That's process called health technology assessment. but we also have a bit of a vision about what we think that process should be. It's an international process. It's used in more than 40 countries around the world, but it's a little bit different wherever it happens. And that's because it sits around a core definition. And a few years ago, we worked with people in patient communities around Australia to say, well, what what do you think how this thing, health technology assessment should be defined? And I remember Susan was there, and Jill has been involved in some of that feedback, and so that's really given us our vision as an organisation. Our vision is that to ensure the best outcomes for patients in an equitable and efficient health system, that this process, health technology assessment, works in partnership with patients to provide recommendations based on timely, transparent, inclusive, and fit for purpose processes and evidence. And you might know that at the moment, the legislation says that the committees need to find that the treatments are clinically and cost effective. It legislates for a consumer member, but it doesn't legislate for that partnership with patients. But we do have some really motivated people in the system. And I think, we saw how your community could actually engage with it when recently. Not as recently as I thought it was, actually. I hadn't realized how many months had gone past since that PBAC decision for the new lupus treatment, but I saw that your community got involved and got engaged there. So, sorry, I'm just going to move so I can see this better. So we sort of have a focus that is that we like to collaborate with all stakeholders in this place. We're here for patient organisations, so we feel like we're not going to achieve our mission unless we collaborate with lots of like-minded people, whether they're in the department, whether they're researchers, of course, other patient communities, and also with industry as well. And so we have a focus which is on growing our community competency to partner and get involved in health technology assessment. We want to grow the evidence base so that the evidence base that informs policy decisions is more informed by patients' perspectives. We want to reduce the delay to access, and we want to grow the system's competency to learn from patients. And we call that stronger, smarter, faster, and more impactful. So you can see that learning together is a big part of our focus. We're tiny. We try to act bigger than we are. Maybe you're familiar with patient organisations doing that, but we have to do it in a smart way. We only have the knowledge and skills that we have. We want to be here for as many people as possible. And so we collaborate. We collaborate with anyone who wants to work in this space, and we learn from each other as we do it. So I gave you a question. It's not really a poll because I don't have a poll running, but it's a question because we're thinking about working together. I'm really interested for your thoughts on what makes working together hard. I had a little scribble about the sorts of things that we often find, and I think they just really reflect what you're putting there. But it's good to think about why collaborating is hard, because that sort of tells us why we might not do it, and actually helps us to make a judgment, I think, about when we do it and what the value will be. Because we don't just want to be doing it because we feel under pressure to do it. Oh, delegation of responsibilities. Yeah, that's a really tricky stuff. And particularly when we're volunteering and how we don't always have the same structures. We have some structures in our organizations, but it can be difficult. And also we often don't sit there with the same sort of policies and procedures that big organizations or paid work does. And there's multiple reasons for that. And we're all different in this. Different patient communities do different things. The first one is sort of local relevance. One of the reasons we have different groups is if you're providing guidance on support in Australia, we're all working in different systems with different knowledge needed to navigate them. We have real variation in our services across the country. And so, so it makes sense to have local groups with local knowledge. And as we picked up in the chat there, logistics, it can be 8 o'clock might be a great time for people, but it might be 10 o'clock for someone else in the country. The logistics of getting people together is complicated, and it sometimes needs money just to do that. It's quite hard to get into collaboration when you don't get to see each other. But you can, because we know that groups like yours who meet online regularly and encourage informal conversation actually do it really well. Um, yeah, I'm just looking at phase. Too many commitments, but wanting to take every opportunity. I know. I feel like that is the worst part of advocacy. Like I think I'm just so opportunistic. I hope you hear that in a positive way. But I see an opportunity, and I'm sure you're the same. You see things, but I actually don't physically have the resources and sometimes not even the skills to do every opportunity that comes my way justice. And then I think, well, who else can do it? And that's where I think, oh, I wish I had a network there to tap into. But sometimes you think, oh, well, I could do that. And it's just one more thing. And I didn't really need to sleep or take care of my health. I'll just see if I can burn myself out. So we see opportunities and we want to grab them, and that makes it hard to prioritize. And as we talked about, it takes time and it needs investment to collaborate. And and it can be easier sometimes just to do things by yourself, especially when working with others means relying on other people. And sometimes they let you down, and sometimes I let people down. And I don't mean to. It's just that I'm unwell or I get different priorities. And we're a pretty good community at forgiving each other for that. We totally get it. But then we think, oh, I'll just do it all myself next time. I won't do that. So that happens as well. Oh, thank you, Susan. Feeling threatened by the share of dollar grants, competitive. Of course, there's so little money in this sector. We all have long lists of priorities. And then rather than collaborating, sometimes it makes us just carve out our area and defend it because we have to try and get the money and we have to sell what we're about. And I guess we also have different cultures and different personal styles. We always say in Patient Voice Initiative, we don't really throw rocks for advocacy. Now, some groups do that really well. Jessica and I would joke that our aim is really, really not up to rock throwing, but we like to link arms. We like to show people practical ways and learn from them as we're doing it. That sits much better with our personalities and our skills. So sometimes when we go to collaborate, we go, oh, okay, look, all of that's perfectly valid, but we don't feel very comfortable in that space. So we won't go too far there. And then I guess that when we were talking about different priorities, we can have different ideas about which areas to focus on and which needs should be tackled first and how to get there. And that has implications for how we spend our time and our money and what measures we're using to determine impact. But I think sort of the interesting thing about collaboration is that all those things that are the reasons we don't collaborate can be exactly the reasons why we want to collaborate sometimes. And so I'm thinking about this particularly through the way decisions are made about what's available in our health service. That local relevance, which means that you have local support service, that actually means that you have people who have really good grassroots knowledge, and when you come together, can understand the variation in the system. And gosh, health technology assessment committees like PPAC and MSAC want to know about that. They want to know that if some areas don't have access to a specialist, that GPs do this, or that the pathway is different. So that local relevance, when you bring it together to pull up a picture which shows difference across our country, that can be really valuable. If we think about health policy reform, these are areas that have a huge scope and impact, and there are many different spaces in them that you might want to influence. So the different sorts of ways we are as patient organisations can be ideal for different types of policy information, and that delivery of healthcare is no different. So for something like HTA, the process for deciding the treatment is good value and should be used on the PBS or Medicare. I say this a lot because I don't expect any healthy or person with a condition to remember what HTA is or what it stands for. So every time I talk about it, I'm just thinking about how we make decisions about what is on our health system. But, that local relevance that gives us the grassroots knowledge. The differences among groups here might also be important differences to understand for groups of people living with a condition. And in terms of priorities, some people or groups focus on research, some on fundraising, some on grants and budget requests, some on political lobbying, some on supporting patients. I've definitely missed a couple of the other million roles that patient organizations take on, but all of those are critical, but they take different skills. And so sometimes someone might be really good on that local relevance, the grassroots knowledge, and then someone who's actually really good at, messaging. You don't want them, leading the collection of input into that grassroots knowledge, but they might be quite helpful informing your key messages to take in on your reports. And most of us have different levels of skill in different areas. And the lovely thing about collaboration is finding who it is who can do the things you can't. And also in an area like patient advocacy, which often lacks validating behaviors, can I say? I think it's really nice to realize more about your own worth. You're not just there because you turn up, you're there because you really have knowledge that's valuable. So I just wanted to give you an example of where I think collaboration has made a really big difference in health technology assessment. I'll add some caveats to it, but it has made a big difference. And one of the places I think it's made a difference is actually during the health technology assessment policy and methods review. And in that review, more than 50 organizations came together to sign a joint response to one of the consultations. And I can say that what it did was it elevated the messages. Now, when you're in a robust decision-making process, you read every submission you get. So, certainly as a patient representative, I read all submissions, but I spent particular time going back through the patient submissions, making sure I had made notes of all the issues that were being raised. But a document that comes in signed by 51 organizations, actually that pushes its way on the agenda. And it says, okay, well, this isn't just a comment coming from your patient representatives that's added to the minute. This is something we really need to look at quite closely. And particularly in Australia, where collaboration like this is quite unprecedented, it really got people's attention. And it's something people are still talking about from the review. It showed that people can actually agree about things. So when you see something like this, and when you're looking at any submission, you want to know what is the ask that's in it, and on what basis do they make that ask, or what is their claim? What is their authority in this area? For example, if someone's making a claim for patient organizations, it's expected to come from a patient organization, not from a clinician. Clinicians have their own society. So your authority is your patient organization, or sometimes if you're doing these things independently, they might be your individual lived experience. But on something like a review, to see so many organizations get behind some key points makes it very compelling. You also can see that whenever you get any individual submission, because policy is complicated, that you might actually get competing ideas. Now, you might get competing ideas to the ones that were in this document, but what it says to a committee is these are things that people can agree on. So there's probably quite a lot of support out there. We're interested in when people disagree, but actually these people have been pretty much in agreement here. And when you get an item with this many signatures on it, you feel a degree of confidence that something matters to the community, and you make time to really go through it step by step with all the committee members, not just the patient representatives on it. And this particular work was led by two people who you probably know, Louise from Rare Voices and Sharon from Over at Lymphoma. But there were also lots of other active patient organisations with experience in this area. But what those people with experience who just, informally made this group and tried to make this happen, what they did was they really encouraged a bit of peer-to-peer learning, because not every patient organisation has time or interest in getting down to this. So they could help reduce some of the burden for people. And they had authority, but they weren't authoritarian. So they said to people, look, if you want to agree with this and put your logo on it, do, but you can, if there's things that we didn't all agree to that you would like to put forward, or there's things that are particular to your community, do that as well. And that was fine too. It just showed us where there was quite a bit of consensus in the community. So examples like that sort of show us the way collective advocacy magnify the voice, but also help the patient community to own the narrative in the same way that, Medicines Australia for industry can own the narrative. And it enables us to be very clear and professional in our advocacy in a way that's really helpful to policymakers. I think policymakers don't expect us to be Medicines Australia. In fact, they'd be a little bit shocked if they were, but it really helps us when we can be really targeted and clear with them. It increases decision-making certainty, which is great because you spend a lot of time trying to work out what do people want, what's the better way to go here. There's multiple routes to take. It capitalizes on the strengths of community, and it reduces people's burden. So if you knew nothing about health technology assessment and the HTA review, you could come along to those meetings and get a sense of what people were saying, and you could form an opinion. Don't have to take a deep dive with it. Now, I just wanted to share that, if we go back to thinking about the individual submissions and into an individual assessment, say at PBAC, what's the value of collaborating there? Well, I found it fascinating what the lupus community did in those webinars, and thinking about how that community, and you can tell me more about how it came together and continues to come together around what initially started with a submission. And one of the things we always say is a lovely aspect of our system here in Australia when treatments are under consideration is that anyone can make a submission. But one of the things that has happened is people thought, oh, well, the more submissions, it must show that the community really wants something. So we should get as many as possible. And so people have, with good intention, made form letters. But actually what's really useful is not doing just lots of individual submissions. If those individual submissions answer some key areas that and I've just put up some there to remind you that the committee's actually really interested in the patient's views and perspectives, then an individual submission can be important, but it's incredibly valuable to be able to tell that story in a compelling way, which might include quotes from people from your community, that actually helps the committee understand your priorities and really owns the narrative on what your community wants. Even if what your community wants, there's disagreement about. So say a treatment comes through and some people in your community say, well, I wouldn't take it for these reasons. And others say, well, I would for these reasons. It's great to have that difference view in your application. It shows you really know what's happening in the community. Your community's not all the same, but but submissions that can help bring together that story about what really matters to the patient communities, that's not sitting there in the clinical and economic evidence. What outcomes matter to you, what's your experience of treatments. If you've had experience of the new treatment, you could include that. If not, what's your experience of the treatment it's being compared to? if you don't take any treatments, why not? What do you know about treatments that the committee should know about? Which populations you're aware of that have particular need? What quality of life really means. I often say I remember seeing a group put together, someone did a copy of the agenda, their daily diary agenda for treatment, and then showed the difference between what it was to have to do 4 hours of treatment a day compared to 30 minutes in the morning. Eligibility, who's going to miss out or who could be missed out depending on the way the recommendations go, what it means for family. When we live with conditions, it has impact on those around us. Sometimes people want to share, if someone's not able to share themselves, a family member can share input. But sometimes we want to talk about, well, what does that mean for a family when there's a condition? What are the costs beyond the cost of the treatment? All those costs that come with the way treatment's currently given. What about what your location means? We talked about that earlier. What about how it's set up for who can prescribe it? What's that going to mean? What about variations in services and what do you want longer term? You wouldn't have to, as a community, answer all these questions for every assessment. But is there anything there when an assessment comes along that you think is important for the committee to know? And as we've talked about, you can tackle that in different ways. You can gather information and stories yourself. You can work with researchers to gather this as evidence, which maybe you can use for multiple applications and multiple policy work. And it's really down to how you want to do that. But you can see that even when you just want to make a small contribution, there's a real value in being able to talk and brainstorm across your community about how you want to do it, what knowledge is going to be useful there. And so I guess we saw that. As I was saying, I was so shocked to think that's the date back in March 2023. But we saw that the community came together to make a submission to PBAC. We get in the public summary document feedback on that, which suggests, I'm going to use the word feedback lightly because it's really hard to tell what happens there. The public summary documents, you may know, came out of a trade agreement with the US. They weren't out of a way of patient involvement. But we can see that they've highlighted things that they found particularly useful. And sometimes it's about how it validated other information in the document. But the real way to know as a community what you did that was valuable and what you don't need to bother doing is to ring Jo Watson, the deputy PBAC person, and she will talk to you quite directly and openly to give you feedback because these are really hard to understand. And Jo would always say to people in patient communities, she's there for you. We may not have the proper clear documents at the moment that give feedback, but get it from someone who was in the room, and she'll be incredibly helpful with that. So I just wanted to quickly, I think I'm taking a bit long. I'm going to speed up, sorry. I just wanted to quickly make a few points about collaboration and collective action. One of the things about when you're doing a submission like for PBAC is you've got about 8 weeks. And I think of that as a very hot time rather than a cool moment to collaborate. And we know that collaboration depends on time and building trust and getting used to each other's styles. So collaboration works best in cool moments when the countdown's not ticking. It benefits when we can make a few mistakes. We can put half-formed ideas out there and test them out with each other rather than judging each other about how much we all know. And it really benefits when there's a clear problem to come around. I just wanted to quickly show you a cool moment that's sitting out there now, not to add to your workload, although it would, but just to flag it with you. So you know that now this health technology assessment policy and methods review has made 50 plus recommendations. There's an implementation group set up. We've got two patient representatives on it. One is Nicole Millis from Rare Voices Australia, and one is KP from Breast Cancer Network Australia. They are your representatives. They are very happy to talk to you anytime, and they will be looking for ways to engage the community and do this implementation report. So sorry, these are tiny, but happy to send you the full reports of anything there. But just to say that the report includes a lot of things that came up as what patient communities wanted. So recommendations around equity, recommendations about the time it takes for these things to happen, recommendations about improving transparency or having transparency, recommendations about how patients and communities want to engage, and recommendations about building that patient evidence. Okay, and then a lot of what's in the system is in the recommendations is also trying to think about how do you front load a system? So how do you learn as much as possible about the value of something before it even hits the PBAC or MSAC. And that really flags some really important roles for patients about horizon scanning and how you might work with bodies to identify priorities and get involved in things like the PICO, which is where things such as the population and the indication and the comparators and outcomes gets agreed. And one of the biggest features of the HTA review was that I think we said the word co-design. I think it's there like 37 times during the final report. And what that was to say was that they recognized that they can't implement this review unless they work with everyone to do it. And that includes patient communities. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities as we get into implementation for patient communities to feed into how things happen and what they should look like. And so they're going to come with questions, and they're going to be much tougher questions than ever before, but really important questions for reforming how our health system works. So there will be questions like, how are we going to define unmet clinical need? What does that would mean for your community? Or what technologies would you prioritize and why? Or where are the greatest unmet needs in your community? So these are quite complex questions. And they're questions that can lead to answers that can inform not just HTA reform to give you a system that works better for your community and is more relevant to your community's needs, but they can inform other parts of health policy as well. And those are going to be questions where individual communities are going to need to think about their answers. And then as a community, we're going to need to talk together more to work out how we approach this work. It is a tough question. Here's my two. I don't even think there's 2 cents worth here, okay? So just hear it for what it is. One is, we just saw that there's a whole lot of reasons people don't collaborate. So I tell myself not to assume why people aren't going to collaborate with me. Maybe they just, there's a person doing some fantastic work that I'm so excited about, but I just haven't had any time to get back to it. And maybe she thinks that I just don't want to collaborate, but I do. I'm just stretched thin. So that's the first thing is I refuse to believe that people don't want to collaborate with me, but I only come and ask so many times because I'm only human. The second thing is, I read Hilda Bastian's blog. I don't know if any of you know Hilda Bastian. She was instrumental to starting up Cochrane and consumer networks in Australia, and she was very smart person in statistics and all sorts of stuff. She writes an incredible blog, and she's incredibly thoughtful about, she's done some work with the chronic fatigue syndrome ME community and been really thoughtful about the patient voice. So she's a bit of a hero of mine. But she recently, in my other hat, I was watching people losing jobs all over North America and feeling very stressed about what was going on there. And she wrote an incredible article where she quoted this work called Refugia. Now, apologies if I'm not pronouncing that properly, but Refugia. And it talked about how when there had been this major volcano, people thought it might be like 100 years before vegetation would return to this beautiful part of Italy. And over time, people were shocked to find what grew back there. And actually, what had happened that although the volcano seemed to decimate everything in its track and everything looked hopeless, in fact, underneath a rock, a little bit of plant life was growing. And over here, where this, tree came down, it protected something else. And the message of it was that look for the bits that are behaving the way you want to behave and link up and grow together to do it. Because there's always going to be people who won't want to collaborate for whatever reason, but there's plenty that do. And like your group is such a great example of that. Absolutely. Never worry that you're a patient and not a medical professional. People in those roles are passionate about the work you do, and you have a lot of commonality with them. So don't worry about being a patient. You can go and see your local MP. You can talk to them as well. Local MPs want to meet with their community. That's their role. That makes them feel like they're knowing their community. So don't be afraid to do that. If you don't like to meet with people personally, write them a letter. Okay, whatever works for you. If you can't write letters, make a phone call. If you feel nervous, ask a friend. They don't even need to know anything about your work. Ask a friend to come with you just for moral support. And once you do it, if there's someone you need to talk to them. All they can say is no. I don't know if that's helpful, but don't be put off by these people's titles. They want to talk to you.